So yes, the slideshow will be available. Again, just industry overview, but we're going to have some fun with this. What is HVAC? I think this is something that commonly everyone has that big, like once upon a time, maybe you were littler, maybe you heard it somewhere, maybe you heard it, and maybe you just entered, the industry and didn't even know what it was, but you just heard it HVAC, HVAC, HVACR. It really literally is heating, ventilation, and air conditioning. And if you ever see the R on it, like with women in HVACR, that means refrigeration. It's just an acronym. It really kind of covers everything that we do as an industry. It's one of those things where a lot of people will shorthand it. Like I said, I always grew up in a contracting company myself, and we always called it HVAC. Well, some people don't call it HVAC, it's HVAC, but that's the short term or slang that you'll hear about it. Just as an overview, you got to start with a definition. All right, brief history. Guys, we are in one of, and I hate to be like literal here, but one of the coolest industries ever. It is so vital. And yet we have such an optics problem when it comes to what people think about when they think about what HVAC is. But we really do determine, honestly, the destiny of what a lot of this nation was founded off of, a lot of what the world was able to do. Think about it. So like in HVAC in general, when like Willis Carrier invented the first AC, it really did change a lot of opportunities for businesses. It changed a lot of opportunities for expansion. It changed how we were able to live in certain areas of the world. We wouldn't even be able to have business in Arizona, let alone parts of California, if it wasn't even for the invention of AC, let alone thinking about places like Dubai or the Middle East. It's pretty imperative. And then you're getting into industrial, you're getting into also some of the bigger plants that we have. If you think about how our nation was formed, we have so much of our industrial piled onto the Eastern Seaboard. And a lot of that had to do with the fact that we didn't have a lot of climate control options in other places. You didn't have that in the South. And so whether it was a big deal when choosing where to do any of our factories, any way we're doing our planning, any way we're expanding for businesses. And it was a big deal that this changed, honestly, the trajectory of where we were settling, where homes were being built, where people were living, where they were working. And people don't take that seriously, but it is a huge factor when it comes to anything that we do, is the climate control aspect of it actually determines so much. And if you think about the pandemic, for instance, we were obviously a very vital service. We were pandemic proof. It was one of those things where hospitals very much needed to be able to control, what their air cycling was, what was going on with their IAQ, indoor air quality, how they were doing climate control. And these are things that are not optional for a lot of people. Heat is not optional when you live in Minnesota in January. It is one of those things where people take it for granted, and yet we provide comfort and we provide climate control for places that don't have it. And one of the cool things about it, when you kind of go into the history, I kind of have the notes here, but I'm just kind of spitballing with it. When air conditioning first came on the market, it was actually more of a commodity. And so people used it for things like theaters. And so theaters would feature AC as a commodity for people to come in and take a show, during hot summers and stuff, so that they could cool off. It didn't really become mainstream until the 1950s. And that's when people were getting window air conditioners and the basic AC models for their homes. And it was getting more and more into like mainstream America. But yes, HVAC in general is a very, very important trade. And it is very lucrative. For those of us who are in it, we kind of know that now. But it does determine a lot of what had to happen between where we as a nation put up our cities, how we were able to move people around, where westward expansion happened. That was a lot of it. And we take that for granted, and it still makes a big impact on that stuff. All right. Industry organizations, just so you know, this is kind of a random slide here that I put in together. But industry organizations are very, 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 very crucial to this. Well, first off, to us kind of networking and to what happens as policies are created, to what happens as different facets of the industry get together. Women HVACR is an example of a great industry organization, of course, because, well, we're pretty cool. We're kind of a more of a networking group industry organization, and we're a nonprofit for scholarships. We're a nonprofit for attracting women into the industry and retaining women into the industry. ACA, if you guys are familiar with ACA, American Contractors, Air Conditioning Contractor Association, they are one of the biggest ones for policy. And one of the things that they actually do is advocacy, which is a little different than a lot of industry groups, is they're in Washington helping form policy. ASHRAE, a lot more of the engineer and manufacturing group. ASHRAE is actually international. There are chapters of ASHRAE all over the world. And we have one for the US as well. NATE, if you guys are familiar, NATE's very much all about, they're actually associated with AHRI, and they actually have the technician standards for what our install standards are, technicians repair standards are across the industry. So we have a set standard of quality. Hardy, again, is another niche group, and they're very much all about the wholesale and distribution. They're best practice groups, and they also do advocacy for the supply chain. So their whole point is to attract, really great wholesalers and share best practices, but also affect advocacy when it comes to regulatory and any type of legislation that comes out about the supply chain and how it affects their distributors and their contractors. AHRI, that's where we get our standards, guys. That's pretty much where we're getting our CR2 stuff. We're going to talk about a little regulatory in a little bit, but any of our standards that actually determine what we're doing with our equipment, what we're supposed to be at our energy efficiency rating. AHRI is the actual organization that determines all this. And I have somebody that needs to be muted. And HRAI is actually the Canadian version of AHRI. So those are just examples of one. There's tons of industry organizations out there. There's local chapters and national chapters. They really are the key to our success because they allow us to come together and network, share ideas, learn best practices, and make a very big industry seem smaller. And they actually are the forces behind how we're able to get a lot of stuff done as a group rather than just our own individual silos. I encourage you to get involved in industry organizations, especially for your companies if they're not already involved. And as an individual, find ones for yourself to network in, because anything in this business is all about not just what you know, but who you know. And it's one of the most crucial things to growing your career is making sure you're building a strong network. Main activities. So these are just kind of a big overview of the industry overall. Air vent installations, furnace humidifier installations, ventilation equipment. Like there's so many different levels, and I don't want to jump ahead on my slides here. But we focus on several different activities as an industry, not just, but more of the manufacturing, the contracting level. They're working on, of course, installing equipment, creating equipment, distributing equipment, and into ductwork. You have refrigeration systems, you have grocery stores getting into the refrigeration aspect of it. You got freezers. You've got the commercial industrial size stuff for like more bigger buildings and manufacturing plants. There's so many different activities that we have. This is just a few examples. I'm going to like glaze over this one because the next couple slides kind of explain this more. And I don't have my full view today. I'm actually at my kitchen table, which is a little different for me. So I don't have all my screens up, but I'll show you. So we have common challenges. This is a big one that affects all of that. We have stiff competition. HVAC industry is growing, which is cool. We still have a labor shortage, which is a very big thing, is that we actually did ourselves a huge disservice. I'm sure you guys are all familiar with hearing this, but as a nation, our optics problem is on how we portrayed the trades, how we pushed four-year colleges almost relentlessly to the point where the trades got a bad name, whether it was any trade. It was more along the lines of blue-collar jobs fell by the wayside, and yet we can't have the society we have today without those blue-collar jobs. And the thing is blue collar jobs make a lot of money and there's a big future in the trades. And yet we don't advertise that. We do a very poor job of advertising that. And that really affected the last two generations of children coming up through the education system, creating a labor shortage that we are now faced with. That is something that's crippling a lot of our contractors out there. We'll have more demand and not enough labor, and it's driving prices up. It's affecting our industry as a whole. Finding people is the biggest challenge for most of the contractors, manufacturers, wholesalers, and service vendors that I deal with across the board. It's not even just trade labor, it's just labor in general. And so finding good people is something that we have a hard time with as an industry. Customer expectation, I think there is very little transparency between what a customer expects that we do, how much they think it should cost, what they actually know about the industry as a whole, and what goes on behind the scenes. Another thing is seasonality. We are very much seasonally driven. I don't care who you talk to, but we all know that when things like the Texas freeze and when things like, we had, the heat waves go on where people were hitting like 127 degrees, in certain parts of the nation, that drives demand. When we have crazy weather freakouts, that creates demand in our industry. It also affects our supply chain. It affects our equipment stuff. It's one of those things that good weather really does drive up the demand for our business, and it makes us, either busy or slow in times. Now, there's ways to create business during slow times, of course, but weather is a big player in what we do, all seasonality, because I have a hard time selling furnaces when it's hot out, here in Michigan. And yet when the AC is so easy to sell in the middle of July when it's 110 out. So again, weather driven is very much a big deal with us. And when we have mild seasons, like when we have record lows or record highs for certain times that don't really kind of waver, it does affect our sales. One of the two of the new things that kind of came up the last couple of years, especially with COVID, was equipment shortages are a big one. Our supply chain was pretty disrupted via COVID and lots of other shutdowns. And it's created a big gap in what we're able to get in equipment, and then regulatory changes. Now, this is kind of a compound perfect storm, but now we have regulatory changes coming down through Washington. And that means that's changing the standard of what type of equipment we're able to install in different regions. And yet right now, our suppliers are trying to meet the demands of all the back ordered equipment they had for the last couple of years, let alone the new equipment that they need to meet these new regulatory changes. So there is lots of challenges that are going on that actually create their own perfect storms. And that's two of the newest ones that are actually hitting our industry. And it's kind of a sore point that'll work itself out over a period of time, but it's going to be a while before we can catch up. Again, 1,000-foot view, folks. I'm not going to dig too deep in it. There's more experts on this call on some of this stuff. Common terms, SEER. Well, now you're going to be familiar with SEER 2 because that's going to be our new standard. But a lot of people think it's standard energy efficient rating. It's actually seasonal energy efficiency ratio. OEM, you'll hear that term thrown around quite a bit. OEM, original equipment manufacturer, or your top manufacturer. IoT, Internet of Things, dealer, contractor. A lot of people will refer to dealers. If you're a wholesaler manufacturer, you refer to as a contractor, your end user as a dealer of your product. Very similar to cars. Distributor, you have distributors are the ones in the supply chain that are actually working very closely with their contractors and manufacturers. They're the middleman between the product. Manufacturers rep, an individual. So this is another part of the supply chain, but manufacturers also have their own reps that either work just directly with the contractor or directly with the distributor to represent or sell that product. Split system, outdoor unit, combined with an indoor unit. So like these are just the common terms, guys. I'm just giving the most common ones that kind of shake people up. And generally providing more efficiency and configurations options. So you have split systems, and then you get into ton, and then BTU. So BTU, British thermal units, for those of you who did not have a father in contracting and did not grow up with their science project being a vacuum pump and the basics of refrigeration, or carbon monoxide. We had all sorts of crazy things growing up because I was growing up in a contracting company. So I had to learn BTU and how to use a vacuum pump and how to heat basics of refrigeration. We also did a chamber we built. I had to have the fire department at my own science fair because we had a chamber and we were doing carbon monoxide and how to tell carbon monoxide what are the basics of carbon monoxide poisoning and stuff like that. And so we actually had a blowtorch in the chamber and we were showing safety behind that. But all sorts of weird things that you do when you're in the HVACR industry. These are terminology, and I have actually 2 more pages of this in the main slideshow. I cut them for today's slideshow. So if you guys do get a copy of the slideshow later, I have 2 more pages of just common terms and definitions. All right, equipment manufacturers or your OEMs. You have examples. They're the top of the chain. They're the top. They're the ones that actually create the product that we sell. It's not just equipment either. You're talking about also tools. You're talking test instruments, everything from, and I apologize for the logos when the background changed. It kind of messed everything up. But you're also talking about, IAQ products, whether that's, your air scrubbers or your UV bulbs, anything that you have that's a product that's being manufactured and then you're actually selling it at a third party. That's kind of like your top manufacturers. So when you hear the term OEM, that's just original equipment. Carrier, Goodman, Emerson, they're all examples of different manufacturers that have different product lines. Diversitech has several product lines. Quiet Flex, again, Lennox, Trane, they all have their own different product lines or partner companies. I think one of the biggest things I learned is that most everybody has a parent company, and most parent company has several different lines. I gave examples of this last time. An example of this is you have Daikin Technologies now, and you have Goodman and Amana under Daikin. You have JCI, which is usually York and Coleman. You have Trane Technologies, which is getting into Trane, American Standard, and now their partnership with Mitsubishi. So there are just groupings for all major manufacturers just about, and you have a parent company. I do recommend that everybody kind of understand how those work, because it makes it a lot easier when you realize that, you know, because for instance, for us, when we do our sponsorship, we know that when we get a Johnson Control sponsorship, that we'll put the York logo up or the Coleman logo up, and that counts as their sponsorship type of thing. So just get to know what the parent companies are of each, and that kind of helps you understand of how everything works together and how many lines are actually married to each other. And then, I'm sorry, I'm skipping ahead on my stuff and I didn't mean to. All right, distributors and wholesalers. This gets a little complicated. I'm going to keep this one simple. There are several ways that OEMs manufacture to distribute their products. They either use a two-stage distribution system. They either go sell direct. A lot of them will sell direct. In fact, one of the things we're seeing in our industry right now is a new change that we're actually getting into a lot of consolidation. So you're seeing a lot of actual manufacturers purchasing wholesalers now to do their own direct distribution. There's a lot of different ways to do this. The most common is you have independents, which are your private distributors, which are names like Johnson Supply, Munches, Ferguson and Mingledorf, some very famous ones, very big ones around our industry. And then you have direct distribution, where you're getting into where Carrier or CE also sells direct. You have Lennox that only sells through themselves. You have the consolidation that I talked about earlier, where distributors are being bought up by the manufacturer, and they're actually owning the entire chain itself. So we're going to see a little bit of shakeup in the next couple of years and see where distribution and wholesalers, especially with this consolidation. But it's mostly just a lot of either you're selling directly or you're selling through an independent. A lot of independents, for instance, Mingledorf's is all Carrier. Munch is Trane, American Standard. Johnstone usually sticks with Goodman or Johnson Controls products like Coleman. So there's examples. Buehler Young is another big one that's a Carrier Bryant dealer. So there's all different kinds of equipment that each of those represent, and they usually specialize in. And so each of these wholesalers have regions that, you know, like Mingledorf's is very much in the South and Georgia and Florida and everything like that. Johnstone's a lot bigger. Their branches and partners are located all over the U.S. They're all different kind of regions for each of these. Buehler Young is one here that's actually here in Michigan with us. And we actually have several different ones that have regions that they buy all over. So like Munch Supply is a bigger one. They've actually started acquiring more. So now they have representation in lots of different states besides just the Midwest now. So they're expanding even to places like Canada. They have the East Coast. They have kind of the breadbasket in the middle there too. And so then Ferguson's another one like Johnstone, where they're all over the US and they have much, much more branch distribution. A lot of them are franchises in the Johnstone chain, or not anymore, but don't quote me on some of that stuff. I know it, but I'm not going to teach that stuff today because it's not important. Service providers. These are vendors. These are the other side of the industry, that the dirty little secret, the ones that actually are involved in a lot of the shows that you go to. We usually pay for a lot of the stuff that you go to, where also some of us like Schedule Engine, Schmidt Profit Tools, Service Titan, FTL, whether you're financing, whether you're a marketing company, whether you're a data distribution company, whether you're flat rate pricing, any of this stuff that is a service that helps you, a CRM tool like Service Titan. There's several of those. Any of these kind of resources that you use to better your business, that's where you're getting into a service provider or vendor. Online Access is where I work. That's an example of a service vendor. We provide solutions for contractors, and we work with distributors to distribute those solutions. So that's an example of how our work works. New Flat Rate is an example of another service provider. They're a software company, so they actually do flat rate pricing for contractors. Search Kings is a very big one, that if you're a Trane dealer, you're familiar with them. They actually provide pay-per-click marketing for contractors, and they have a very big deal with Trane Corporate to do that. Schedule Engine, recently bought by Service Titan. Schedule Engine is online scheduling. And then Trinity, you have your warranties, and FTL is an example of more financing. There's tons of different examples for this, but any type of service or solution is a service vendor. And a lot of these service vendors are very specific to this industry. These are examples that are mostly specific to the HVAC industry. HVAC contractors. Okay. Contractors, there's a couple different kinds out there, and I have a slide about this next, but basically a business who has a technician workforce and they're tasked with doing the actual install or repair, or they're the ones actually going out in the field to service the consumer. That's what a contractor is. So another example, and I think that's my next slide, examples of contractors, you have lots of different types. So you have new construction contractors. These contractors specialize in new construction sites. So they're the ones doing the new homes, new build outs, and that's what they do all day long, is that they're doing the new layouts and they're actually putting together the whole system, and they're just basically copy and repeat all day long on one job site. Residential contracting is one of the most popular ones. That's where you're getting into doing service calls. You're going out for residential calls. You're the one that's doing emergency service for home residents and personal and private residences. And it's mostly install and replacement, and service and repair are your main tasks. Commercial contracting is getting into your big buildings, whether that be your Chick-fil-A's and your Dollar Generals and your hotels or your restaurants or churches, any type of big building layout, and you have contracts with those facilities, and you're doing rooftop units or larger systems and package systems. You're getting into like cranes to drop them on rooftops. You have a lot of refrigeration stuff. Sometimes it's coolers and ice machines too. Commercial contracting is its own type. I think commercial contracting also has its own challenges, and in fact that you're usually at one job for several different days rather than multiple jobs. Industrial contracting is another one where you're getting into the bigger buildings. That's usually in like huge corporations. You're getting into industrial warehouses. You're getting into like factories. It's big equipment. You're doing big layouts for any of the airflow systems. You're getting into the rooftop units. You're getting into industrial boilers. It's a much, much bigger thing. And usually you have contracts with large companies and corporations, and you do bids quite a bit where you're actually getting jobs that you're on for months at a time. So they're all 4 different types of contracting. The most common ones that we see in our industry are usually the commercial and residential and some new construction. Industrial usually has its own niche too. But these are the ones that you'll hear referred to most of the time and what they actually mean. Supply chain kind of example, you have your OEM at the top, distributors in the middle. Obviously, we talked about earlier, there are some exceptions to this because sometimes the OEM or manufacturer will sell direct or have their own supply chain to sell direct to the contractor. But in general, most of them work through an independent supply chain. And so they use a different distributor. Just an example of kind of what that looks like. There are, like I said, variations. Marketing. One of the cool things that I think makes our industry kind of cool too is that you have this in most industries. Car industries have this too. But we have co-op marketing, and manufacturers actually pay a lot to actually get people to rep their brand, just like anything else. And so how that fits in is they want their dealers to actually be brand loyal. Brand loyal is a big deal for a lot of OEMs, is they want to make sure you're representing their product, of course, and building brand love. So what they do is they usually have programs and rewards programs based, or rebate programs based on how much you sell of a certain item. A program could be up from the manufacturer, or the local distributor that you're using also has their own program for loyalty programs. Loyalty programs are a big deal in our industry. You get certain amounts of rebates, you get certain amounts of rewards based on how much you sell of a certain product or how loyal you stay to a distributor. I would say the last 2 years have been the most tumultuous for our industry. It has been the first time we saw change up between dealers and their manufacturers because there was supply chain issues. And so this was the first time dealers had to go to a different type of equipment if they couldn't get the equipment that they needed in. And so you were seeing relationships kind of shaken a little bit, and loyalty programs kind of divided between 2 different kinds rather than one. Co-op marketing is a big deal for companies like service providers, like the ones I mentioned earlier, because a lot of our services are included in co-op marketing. We help promote product for dealers, whether it be through social media or online stuff, or if you're doing flat rate pricing. A lot of CRM tools like ServiceTitan also have deals with distributors and manufacturers to help their contractors grow. So these are just examples of one of the ways that our supply chain works as far as how vendors fit into that supply chain and where it comes in. Kind of an assistance, if you will. Industry trends. One of the big trends that we have going on right now is our smart and sustainable. So smart technology, you guys have heard the connected home. We have a lot of different things coming out with different thermostats and how they're communicating with whether you have your Google Home or your Amazon Home or whatever it is that you choose to use. You're having the smart house. You control everything from your phone. You have your security cameras. So the connected home is a very big one. Sustainable HVAC is the other one that we're also getting into a year of new regulatory changes now. Since January 1st. And that's one more step into sustainable HVAC. We're changing out some refrigerants. We're changing out a lot of the standards for our equipment so that we're actually becoming more energy efficient. So these are big things that are always industry trends that we are actually facing all the time, where our industry is trying to get better with. Demographics of the industry. This slide right here probably needs an update. This was from last year, and I actually I use Department of Labor statistics when I put this stuff together. We have one for our Women HVACR presentation we do for our ambassador program that has this a little bit more updated. But generally speaking, in our industry, we actually see that it is definitely predominantly male, but that's changing. And hopefully we won't need groups like Women in HVAC one day. That's the goal, right? But we do have a female workforce, especially when you consider all the different levels like distribution and manufacturing. You have a lot of females in very various roles in those groups. It's the technician level and the contracting level where you get the numbers where you see where it's less than 2% of the industry. And field level, we definitely have more men than women, but that's changing every day. Race and ethnicity is another thing, is that it's changing all the time. But again, it's predominantly more white than African-American or Asian or other groups, and that's changing all the time. But these demographics, I think I can get a more updated one if you guys want a copy of this. This is the only one that I didn't get a chance to update, but we usually use the Census Bureau or we use the Department of Labor statistics to get the more updated ones. I know our newest ambassador one has this, but generally speaking, they do stay the same. It is still predominantly male, it's changing all the time, but females in most of these roles usually make significantly more than average. And that's another thing, is the earnings, which is another piece of this that will be in the other slideshow. Popular equipment types. So this is kind of my favorite part of the whole thing, is we actually get to go, because I know when I started, even though I grew up in a contracting company, and now I've been doing this for 12 years, but knowing the difference, and I had to teach my crew this all the time. So when we do marketing specifically for the HVAC industry, our crew has to know the different equipment types. We have to be able to talk to contractors and distributors and actually have an idea of what they're showing us in pictures or what type of services they offer. And if we're advertising for them, if we're putting stuff on their website, if we're putting stuff on social media, we need to be able to tell that we're putting a picture up of the equipment they're talking about and be competent. And so that's why one of the reasons and driving forces between putting this together was the fact that we had to do that in order to make sure that we knew what we were talking about and that our crew was comfortable actually, portraying what they needed to know. So examples of equipment, we're going to go through this. Our equipment in this industry is very, very much climate driven. In fact, you'll see different types in different areas offered. And like an example of this is like boilers are very popular in the Atlantic, East Atlantic here, and a lot of the Midwest, but you will rarely see a boiler in Arizona. It's just not happening. Swamp cooler is something you'll see maybe in Denver, Arizona, El Paso area. You're never really going to see a evaporative cooler in Michigan. It just can't work that way. We're pretty weather driven. Ductless is now ductless mini splits are becoming way more popular. Generally speaking, they were very popular in the Pacific Northwest. And they had certain places like with older construction and stuff where they became very popular, where you couldn't do a full refit of a house. But now I feel like they're becoming more mainstream, especially with energy rebates, especially with how commonplace they are in the marketplace now. In fact, the US is actually one of the few places in the world that still does systems like with furnaces and individual ACs and heat pumps. Most of the world actually does ductless. And so if you actually go to other parts of the world, whether it's Europe or, Asia or even South America, it's all ductless down there. We're very kind of unique in what our offerings are and how many different choices we have for equipment here in the US. So let's go through that. So equipment range, heating choices, equipment, just kind of going over what your electric, natural, gas. Most of our heating is natural gas. Unless you're in most of like the Midwest and most of the Eastern Seaboard. And we get into different types of electric and other options as you go more west, actually. It's changing all the time. It's becoming more and more common to have electric options now, and more popular to not use natural gas. Personal opinions aside, we'll see how that goes. We'll see where each grid can support it. So far, we've had a couple of big storms that have proven that maybe electric's not the way to go quite yet. We'll see. Furnaces. So again, furnace is more popular. Like furnaces are pretty popular everywhere, but I will say that they probably sell more furnaces up here in Michigan, Wisconsin, and Minnesota than you do in Texas. But the gas furnace is the indoor part of the system. Most everything here in Michigan that we deal with for our contracting company and what we sell up here is furnaces. I personally have like 100-year-old home, so I have a boiler. But in general, most people usually see some type of furnace system like this, and you also have a condensing unit outside. The other side of it is heat pumps. Heat pumps specifically are more popular in Texas, not to be confused with the AC condenser. They look similar, but they are not the same. Or if you have a ductless heat pump, which is the next slide here. Ductless heat pumps usually have the inside piece, which is the cassette there. And then you have the outdoor condensing unit. So they're usually very popular, first off, because they're energy efficient. Second off, they're becoming like, you have your examples of people that are brands that are very ductless. On my mouth drawing out. So sorry, guys. Brands like Mitsubishi, Fujitsu, Daikin, all of these different ductless units are very popular now. There's a lot more rebates out there for them. I know in Michigan, we're seeing a big switch where most people were doing furnaces and air conditioners for a while, or AC units for a while. Now ductless is becoming a big drive. And so where we have older buildings too, ductless is very popular where people can't do an entire retrofit. So it's easier to use a ductless unit and do individual rooms. If you're doing an add-on, sometimes it's even better. My house specifically, we have my 100-year-old plus farmhouse. I'm actually looking into a ductless AC unit because right now I just have a boiler and my house can't do ducts at all. So that's one of the things that I'll be looking at pretty quickly. Air conditioners or the AC condenser. This is your outdoor unit, exactly what that looks like. It's not to be confused with the heat pump that you saw. The AC unit, again, air conditioning is pretty common throughout pretty much everywhere. It's not one of the things that you'll see go away soon. In fact, we have new regulatory coming through that the equipment's changing, and you'll see the size change quite a bit. We have backup equipment, though. Everybody has different requirements based on the region that you're in. But your AC condenser unit looks like this. You usually see it outside the home, and you have to have usually a furnace on the inside, and even or have an AC if you have the ducts for the air to actually go through. And I wanted to point something out to that last slide there. 84% of all homes in the US have ACs. That number is actually changing, like I said. That was kind of the last time they did the demographics on this, but that number is actually shrinking a little bit. Now that ductless is becoming a little bit more mainstream, that's actually switching out and lowering, and a lot more people are going ductless than they were before. Going backwards. Sorry, guys. This is probably breaking here. The evaporative cooler or swamp cooler. Evaporative coolers are, if you guys live in places like Arizona or New Mexico or El Paso, Texas, or some parts of Denver where it's ever a dry climate, these you'll find they're not necessarily my favorite. They're pretty interesting, but basically evaporative coolers, you'll see them, they'll sit on top of the rooftops and stuff, and they have basically like a blower motor on the inside that draws air in, and they have these cardboard filters on all four sides of the unit. And what they're doing is they're sucking air through those cardboard filters that are full of water, and they're cooling the water. And so the water is actually, it's the basics of refrigeration there. And so then that water is being cooled as it's being sucked through those, or that air is being cooled as it's being sucked through that cold water in those filters on either side of the box, and it's being blown into the home. Now, they're very cost effective. Personally, I find them very dirty. They're hard to clean, and they're usually hard to maintain because a lot of people don't get up there and actually clean their filters or their systems. But they are a cost-effective and very popular form of cooling homes, especially in more temperate climates like you're getting into like desert areas. You won't ever see them in climates like Michigan or anywhere on the East Coast or anywhere in the South like Florida where it's too humid to use them. Boilers. Boilers are, again, more common in the East Coast. You also have industrial size boilers, which are much bigger than these. But boilers generally last a lot longer, but they're also way more expensive to maintain. I actually have a boiler in my home. I have a Sears Home Mart, and I think it's like almost 68 years old. It's definitely older than me. I will need a new one eventually. It's by the grace of God and that we own a contracting company that the thing's still alive. I've just been putting out. Or holding out on getting a new system. But boilers are using, you're using radiant heat at this point because you have the radiators that you see in the picture right there. You have those old time radiators all throughout the house, and the boiler is actually, those are all filled with water and they're being heated. And so that radiant heat is being used to heat homes. They're cost effective. They're still using natural gas usually to heat the boilers, but they're still pretty cost effective and as opposed to forced air. But they are usually only found they're more common in the East Coast. They're not really common in Texas. They're not really common on the West Coast. You still have options for boilers, but generally speaking, you'll usually only find them on the other half of the US. They're where they're actually more common, where contractors are actually fixing them and selling them still. Oil boilers. Our company, our contracting company here in Michigan used to do oil. We got out of it years ago, but oil boilers, if you guys have ever been to old homes, they had oil boilers and they had these big drums in the basement and everything. Very, very few contractors do these. In fact, it's very specialty now to even do oil housing, but this is a lot more common on the East Coast because you're getting into older homes that are 100 and 150, 200 year plus old homes that have these, and they need a special type of maintenance. They need to have the oil refilled. They need a specialty contractor in order to even service them. It's very rare to see them actually offered now. They're probably not even offered at all. So it usually is just a retro maintenance of anybody that's actually servicing them now. They're rarely are they being offered as a new install, but it just recognizes the difference that there are different types. And every time you see that giant drum in someone's basement, it's like a huge, big oval drum, like in the picture down there, that's an oil boiler. Geothermal. So geothermal is another specialty that some contractors will offer. And geothermal systems are super expensive to put in, but they're super cost effective, very expensive to repair. But you're basically using your ground source as your heating. And so a lot more in Michigan, for an example of this in Michigan, a lot of the bigger homes in the country that don't have access necessarily to all the utilities that they have, they'll use a huge geothermal system to heat their homes. And they're basically they have a whole pump dug in their ground. They're very expensive to put in, but they're very, very cost effective. We have several contractors around this area that actually specialize in geothermal and its equipment and having to dig for the actual pumps, having to do the install, having to put it through the house. It's definitely probably the most cost effective, but then the most expensive out of the stuff to put in. Solar heating. Solar heating is becoming way more popular than it even has in the last 3 years. Incentives, especially energy incentives, rebates incentive, government incentives have pushed it quite a bit. And you're basically using solar as the power source to actually run your heating system or your cooling system. And so solar panels, there's all sorts of different ways to do solar, whether you're doing panels or you're doing rooftop stuff, if you're doing stuff out in the backyard. One of the things that is kind of a big thing for our industry is that solar companies, companies offering solar, is becoming more and more common. I think California kind of leads the way right now with solar conversion. Most of the West Coast does, but it's coming here. I know in Michigan, we have big incentives now to go solar as well. Again, regionally, it's definitely more popular in different regions that have more sun. So places like, Southern California, Arizona, New Mexico, Nevada use a lot of solar power options. It's becoming more and more mainstream, especially as the government keeps pushing out incentives and rebates, and we should probably see a lot more conversions to it. So I just happen to have too many cloudy days here in Michigan, so we'll see. Radiant floor heating. Radiant floor heating is also a really cool service. In fact, I'm seeing it as a subsidiary service with a lot of my contractors because you get into radiant driveways. You get into sidewalks. A lot of big colleges actually in our area, what they do is they actually install heated sidewalks and heated for their campuses. And a lot of places will do heated parking lots now to avoid any type of liability for people slipping and falling and save money on shoveling sidewalks. Snow is a big deal for us here. But radiant floor heating is very similar. It's the same. It's the radiant floor where you're installing the piping underneath the floor ahead of time, and you have a system like a boiler that actually heats the water or the liquid from that underneath your floor, and it heats the whole home from the floor. It's very expensive to put in, very, very cost effective. Again, it's a pretty crazy system. I have been to 2 different places that offered that, and where they were both different colleges that actually installed that from the ground up for their entire sports facility. And it's a pretty cool thing to watch the install and how they lay it all out. But again, you can do subsidiary services like radiant floor driveway, or radiant driveways, pretty much, where you're doing the snow melt, where you install the coils underneath the cement and then it heats from underneath. And then that means that it won't freeze, you won't get ice, don't have to shovel your driveways. That's another popular service that this kind of leads into. Water heaters. I put these in here because this was a big deal for a lot of my crew, and people don't realize it, but water heaters are kind of a sub-service that a lot of contractors will offer, because of course it depends on regionally, but you just have to have the gas license to put them in, or you're not a plumbing company or our plumbing company. But I had one of my girls mistake a water heater for a boiler. And when you're doing social media for people, that's not a good thing. And so this was why we do this every year, to make sure that people understand the difference. But water heaters are a very common sub-service and something that equipment type that HVAC contractors sell. And there's tankless versions of it. There's all different kinds of water heaters that are offered out there. But this is just an example of what a regular water heater looks like in a basement, and just to make sure that people can recognize them when they see them. All right, that was a lot. Like I said, it was a very basic overview, but I did make sure that we left time for questions and answers and all sorts of things, and even discussion. I hope that anybody found this helpful. I know it was kind of fast. I kind of trimmed down my original slideshow because I thought we'd run out of time.
Helene, how do we get the slides?
I can definitely have those up on a downloaded portion of our site if you want, or else we can send them out, because we did find a way to download the mailing list from Zoom.
I think, Colleen, that'd be great, because that was the majority of the chat. Everybody's leaving all their emails and everybody wants the slides. So I did have a couple of questions in the chat. Sure. And I'm also going to probably have maybe 1 or 2 unmute, because I'm not quite sure, but I know there was a lot of shout outs for a lot of different companies, which was awesome. So, and also people were answering in the chat as we went along. So that kind of made it fun. One of the questions was, is there an HVAC organization which promotes national refrigerants? And we had a great response that it's North American Sustainable Refrigeration Council. So that was taken care of. ESCO Institute, shout out. AMCA, shout out. So a lot of them were putting in where they're from and what they were doing. Women in HVACR booth, that'll be at AHR at it'll be B1023. So Rachel, thank you, because I was like, yeah, we'll be there, but thank you for clarifying where we will be. And there was one question, and I'm not too sure. It says, why IoT? And maybe I have read that wrong.
Internet of Things. So Internet of Things, I'm not the expert in this, but there's got to be somebody on the call. But Internet of Things is like you're talking about the connected behind the scenes. It's the language that we're using for like thermostats to controls. It's mainly a controls language. Again, I am not the expert on this by any means, but when you're hearing the word IoT, it's referred to as Internet of Things, and that's getting into controls.
Well, that's cool, because I quickly Googled it and I'm like, what's IoT? So I didn't. So, and then somebody thought it was DIY. So I'm not quite sure. Yeah.
So I put the link in the chat for our AHR, so you guys can see our full lineup of speakers too, along with our meet and greet and along with our booth numbers in there as well, because we will be at AHR.
Great. Other than that, just tons of happy birthdays, great presentations, and everybody wants your slide done. So there you go.
All right. Thank you, guys. Is there anybody else that has any questions? I'm sorry if this went too fast.
I have a question, Colleen.
Yes.
As we want to, I want to educate myself a little bit more on the technology side, which your slide deck is great. I'm going to go back and I'm going to kind of take my time and read through it all. But is there another program, maybe online, where we can just to get a better understanding, especially when we're contributing to the trades? Is there maybe like like a skill. Have you heard of SkillCat? I think I've heard of SkillCat, where it's like a online training, like something that we can do on our end, which
So
that you
SkillCat
can-
offers virtual training too. They have like an online demo, if you will, or they have online, what's the word I'm looking? Module. They have an online module.
who
There
does?
is SkillCat.
SkillCat. Okay, good. Okay.
Yeah, no, SkillCat's one of our partners too. And so
Okay.
SkillCat actually offers a like online module that you can do online and kind of like a 3D thing, like you were fixing a unit. It's kind of like a 3D module.
Awesome.
So they have different things that you have. There's several resources out there. I know, well, I know we always message us, but some of our partners have some of the better resources than we do, even when it comes to if you're looking for individual equipment stuff. So like Explore the Trades is one of them.
Okay.
I know that the ESCO group, if I think Renee somewhere, has
Yeah.
a lot of those opportunities. So they actually network with a lot of the educators. They actually kind of set the standard for educators. And so getting into what courses they're offering, they're kind of set the standard for what's being taught for any of our technicians going forward. But online resources, SkillsCat's a good one. I lost the name of the other one I was thinking of. There's another partner that we have that also offers online training for anybody that's just interested in learning to see if they're even interested in it. And I'm trying to think of our partners. Erica, can you help me here? If she's here.
Yes, I'm here. Sorry, I'm on my phone today.
I was thinking of partners that have online options and I know some of our partners actually do offer online options for people to kind of learn. We also have HVACR EDU. They're another partner of ours that do online courses for people that want to just even get their contractor's license, or if you just want to start getting your certificates for certain things, they have online training. I know I'm missing some of the partners. I know I didn't know if you.
What about EIGA? And we know ACA. So
Yeah,
Maybe we can
definitely.
include it in a copy of the recording. I'm over here trying to Google all these places all at once. Maybe we can include like the links and all these different training, like online training stuff.
I could put it in the chat too.
Okay, awesome. Thank you.
SkillsCat does free EPA certification. I know that Dynamic has some IAQ certifications that you can do if you want IAQ. And I know that Faraday also has some programs. They're another one of our partners. So you can actually find all of these people on our partner and sponsor page on the website, and it'll link right back to their website. So they're underneath
Okay, awesome.
sponsor partner page.
Awesome. Thank you guys.
there is 2 more questions in the chat, Colleen. One lady put in, if you're interested in participating in training sessions in Spanish, you can write her and she'll gladly collaborate. And that's Abigail. So Abigail, I don't know if you want to drop your email into the chat and then maybe they can pick it up from there. So that's an option too. And if anyone needs to learn how to read serial numbers to determine unit age, Building Intelligence Center online is a great resource. And I think, Louise, you had a question on that. So kind of a shout out to that. And yeah, there's lots of good resources. And I think there was one more. There was a question though, Colleen. California is pushing for ZEE, which is the zero emissions equipment in so many different industries. Small engines are being banned soon. SOAR ban. Do you anticipate something similar with happening for HVAC equipment, such as heaters and furnaces? So I'm sure you've got a lot on that one.
Yeah, I mean, it's one of those things like, so a lot of so just a call out to one of our partner organizations that we kind of learn a lot of stuff from is like, we have several partners that we keep up with regulatory and like what's happening in Washington. But Hardy, we just got back from the annual conference, and Hardy has a partner and they do a very good job kind of giving a good look at what the economy is going to be doing and what we're going to be looking at as an industry going forward. Nobody has a crystal ball, but they usually do a pretty good job painting that picture. And one of the things that they discussed was California generally kind of sets the pace, and you learn from whether it's a good or bad pace pretty quickly when it comes to the zero emissions or even where their energy efficiency ratings are. And I know that one of the things on the table is gas stoves. That's going to be something that, they're also challenging as far as now it's going to be electric stoves. I feel like we still have a public who doesn't trust going all electric yet. And we don't have an infrastructure that necessarily can support all electric yet. But I think once those changes are made, like these are things that are going to be pushed and we won't have a choice when it comes down, just like anything else, as soon as it comes down from Washington and we have regulations and we have different things that we have to meet as companies, individuals, and some of it's going to be our environmental responsibility, or I can't think of what the thing's called, but basically your environmental and social impact score as each company and what you're going to have to meet. And you can only get certain contracts and certain aid and even financing if you meet some of those requirements. And so it's going to affect everybody and they're going to be able to police it eventually. Never say never. I'm not sure because everything is a timing thing, even with the new equipment we're receiving, even with the new refrigerants we have a schedule that we have to follow in order to, make sure that we're changing it out. It's never going to happen overnight. It's going to be a gradual process, but you will see that zero emissions, everything usually California does first, we usually have to follow eventually, but it just has to be scalable. And that's the biggest thing we're going to find is scalability, especially with equipment shortages. I'm not sure what that's going to look like because you can promise all day long, but if we don't actually have the stuff for it, and we actually are just now getting equipment that we still have back ordered from 2 years ago. So let alone the new stuff. So again, it's going to be a matter of time and honestly implementation. And that's the hardest part because you can make a rule, but it doesn't make it real until you can actually implement it. I hope that's not really an answer. That's more painting the picture. I don't really have a real answer for that. All I can say is this is what is the complications with that. And yes, it could very much happen across the board, but it will be taking a lot of time. So.
And Colleen, I just want to go back because again, it's slides. They'd like to know where they're posted. So I think you had mentioned you will send them up by email.
So if we're talking to everybody here and you can tell your friends, like last year's presentation, which I actually think was maybe I did better than this year's, is actually on YouTube. So if you want, I can keep both of them up there. I'm going to load this recording onto YouTube and then I'll eventually fade the other one out. You can choose between the two if you want. So that's kind of going to be what it's going to be. As far as the presentation recording is going to be there, but as far as the slide deck itself, I can upload it to our resources on the Women HVACR site. And that might be a much simpler solution, is to have the slide deck individually. I might have to just kind of take it apart to make sure it's generic, but yeah, I can upload a PDF of it onto our website, onto resources.
And Erica, shout out to you. Can you explain to them how they can sign up for weekly meetings?
Absolutely. So if you would like to come to every single Friday, weekly Zoom calls like this one, where we have amazing content and speakers, you will need to consider becoming a member of Women in HVACR because it is a membership only benefit. And so get this, there's a few ways to get involved. Ask your companies to pay for it because many of them do. A lot of companies here today are actually sponsors of the organization. And if your company sponsors, there's a different amount of memberships that can come with that sponsorship. So that's an idea. Otherwise, just go online and sign up. It's $149 for a whole year. So it's no biggie. It's very small, but you get so much value. Not only do you get the Friday webinars, you get to start participating in book club. You get to start participating in the mentorship program or ambassador programs. You get to come to conference. Anyone can come to conference, but you get special treats for coming to conference. And so definitely consider joining. And if you know anybody as well that could benefit, share it with them.
It's awesome. Thanks. And I know there's a lot. There are some in the chat about book club is fun. And one lady, her boss paid for her membership. I saw that myself with the distributors meeting. I was trying to recruit somebody and I said to her boss, hey, she needs to join. And he's like, we'll pay for it. So you just have to ask. We don't have the date set yet for 2023 conference. We will have that very soon. We have a meeting up and coming this week, and we're going to try to get more resolution and get those dates out ASAP. So you'll have them very soon.
Thank you guys so much for your time. Again, you can reach out to the organization at info@womenhvacr.org. Or I definitely encourage you to look at our LinkedIn group and our Facebook group. Those are open to anybody. So even if you're like, I don't know if I want to join yet, I just want to see what's going on. Our Women HVACR private group in Facebook and in LinkedIn are open, and they're great ways to kind of engage and kind of find out what's going on. I invite you, if you are going to be in Atlanta at the beginning of February, we're going to be there. Come say hi to us. Come meet us. We would love to meet you. We're never going to make you feel like a stranger. Come to our meet and greet on Tuesday. Come to our booth at the expo. We also have over 20 educational sessions this year. We're going to be literally on fire when it comes to educational sessions. This is the most we've ever had. So we have some amazing partners and sponsors that are coming in to speak and basically educate. They're going to have all different topics. You can find all that information at womenhvacr.org/AHR 2023. Thanks so much for your guys' time. I hope you found this helpful. I know it was a super broad overview, super basic. I'd love to discuss more at any other point if you guys want to reach out to me directly too. And then we have the slides that we'll put up on YouTube, or the entire recording we'll put up on YouTube. The slides will be on the resource page at womenhvacr.org. All right. Thank you guys. I hope you guys have a wonderful weekend, and thank you for your time today. Take care.